Locked On Blues, your daily podcast on the St. Louis Blues. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Locked On Blues podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Thomas Welch.
And I'm Josh Hyman.
And we got an episode for you today. Not sure how fun it's going to be. The Blues were throttled, absolutely embarrassed by the Calgary Flames and Matthew Tkachuk. 7-1 the final score. The Blues looked all out of sorts in every facet of the ice. So we're going to be talking about that in its entirety today. Jordan Binnington versus Ville Husso debate comes up again. Jordan Binnington didn't have a lot of help, and the Blues didn't put on a great show. But we always try to put on a great show, and we want to thank you guys for making us your first listen of the day, whether it's with your cup of coffee, your bowl of cereal, and your morning commute to work or school, whatever it might be. We want to thank you guys once again for starting your day off with the Locked On Blues podcast. So with that being said, the Blues started off pretty good against the Flames. Got a shorthanded goal by Tyler Bozak pretty early into the first period. After that, 7 goals unanswered by the Calgary Flames, 5 assists night by future Blue Matthew Tkachuk. I think that tied a career high for him. Nico Mikkola on the other side of it was a -5, I think, on the night, and was benched in the third period.
Good golf score.
Yeah, not so good of a hockey score. Colton Parayko didn't look too good. And I think a lot of the writers were talking about it, and I agree with this. Obviously, you're playing 3 games and 4 nights. The boys are going to be a little bit tired, especially going over the border to Canada, where things are a little bit different there. And obviously there's a lot more protocols taken into consideration than in America right now. So maybe that had something to do with it. Obviously, they just did not have their wheels or legs under them, and the lack of energy was prevalent from the first period all the way on. So, Josh, what were your takeaways from this embarrassing showing by the St. Louis Blues, 7-1 against the Calgary Flames?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear that the fatigue was catching up to them, playing 3 games in 4 days. And as much as you want to, chalk it up to that and say it's a legitimate excuse, because I think it is, that Western Canada road trip is always going to be a huge pain. And playing 3 games in 4 days is difficult and it takes a toll. But the issue that comes up there is not only how poorly they played, regardless of how fatigued you are, it's inexcusable. There's a couple stretches in February where they have 3 games in 4 days and like 5 games in 7 days and stuff like that. So the schedule is picking up pretty rapidly. Last night being game 42 of the season, the first game of the second half of the season, you really are out of time for excuses and stuff like that. You should be playing close to your best hockey night in, night out. And not only did we not see the Blues' best hockey, that may have been, no exaggeration, the worst performance I have ever seen from any hockey team ever. So, look, can't get worse than that.
Worst performance ever, man.
Maybe, I talked a lot about at the beginning of the year, like Blues going through adversity and winning. It's a good reference point, being able to look back and say, hey, remember when we did this? The flip side of the opposite end of the spectrum, having poor performances like last night, are hopefully a good opportunity as a reference point for Craig Berube to really instill into the team that last night's performance should be drilled into their heads, in the sense that they know what they look like when they show up with that attitude, and there is no excuse to treat any game the rest of the season with that little effort and care, or else they can see what would happen.
Yeah, and I think one of the most disappointing parts of this game, there was a lot, to be fair, but one of the most disappointing parts of this game was how much you talked about on last episode, how big of a game this was for Jordan Binnington to finally get the net back after Ville Husso has been playing so well, and this is his opportunity to kind of assert himself and be like, hey, remember me? I helped us win the Stanley Cup. I easily could have been a Conn Smythe winner if it wasn't for Ryan O'Reilly. I can play good hockey too. And he goes out there and the Blues don't even give him a chance. I mean, we've got Robert Bertuzzo sliding into him, taking him out
Oh my God.
of an entire play, and the defense just hung him out to dry all night long. So as much talk as there was about putting up 7 goals on Jordan Binnington, I really don't think there was a ton that were rough on the eyes, maybe 2 that he probably should have had. But at the end of the day, here's the question that I'm going to ask, and we can get deeper into this over the course of this episode. But I tweeted out that you shouldn't let Ville Husso's play this season distract you from the fact that the Blues defense has been bad this entire season, and that's been the focal point, and that's been the weak part of this team. And so I'm wondering if it's not so much a question of, is Ville Husso more beneficial to this team in the playoffs than Jordan Binnington? I think they're both good goalies, right? But because Ville Husso is playing so out of his mind right now, I can't remember what his save percentage is, but I think it's like a 935 or something ridiculous. Any team that relies on a goalie now Vasilevsky and other guys like that are different because they have a solid defense in front of them. So they don't have to go out and put up a 935 save percentage, but they do. This is different. If Ville Husso doesn't put up a 935 save percentage on like a nightly basis, he's probably getting rung up too for 7. So it's not a question of whether Ville Husso or Jordan Binnington gives us a better chance to win right now. It's a question of what is causing us to lose and what is causing us to play worse. And it's the defense. It's not Ville Husso's not the problem and Jordan Binnington's not the problem. This defense is out to lunch half the time that they're on the ice. And I think that's kind of where I was going with the Ville Husso trade talk. It's not so much that we should trade him for anything and trade him just because he's going to leave in the offseason. But my priority here is acquiring a D-man. So if Ville Husso is the segue to doing that, whether it's Chychrun, whether it's Sherratt, whatever guy is out there, I think you absolutely have to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned Bortuzzo sliding into Jordan Binnington. I think that is literally like a Renaissance painting quality representation of not just last night, especially last night, but the Blues season as a whole, of the defense kind of every once in a while really, shooting themselves in the foot, shooting their own goaltender in the foot. The offense, fortunately at times has been, not at times, consistently has been good enough to take away from the defense, and that's why I don't think it's like a huge, red flag, like sending alarms off the performance last night. It's just when you're a team like the St. Louis Blues who relies so heavily on your offense and your defense is as much of a liability as it is, obviously, there's a stretch there where they really had it figured out, and I think the defense has been playing really strong as of late. The Blues record reflects that. But when you have a defense that is that capable of not showing up, you're gonna lose game 7-1. When your Achilles heel is your defense, like that of the St. Louis Blues, and you get a game like that where everything goes wrong, it's not gonna be like a 6-5 game like it was in Toronto, because it starts with the defense, it starts with the goaltending in a game like that. And when you can't get the puck out of your own end, I don't care how good your offense is, can't get the puck out of your own end, it does not matter. The shot attempts, I don't even remember what they were like 70 to 18 or something like that, shots directed at the net.
Shots on goal were 48 in favor of Calgary to 21 for the St. Louis Blues. That was generous though, because I think the Blues had like 10 through 2 periods.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta just flush it. You can't look at last night's game and try to watch film or try to be, oh yeah, if we just fix this is the worst of the St. Louis Blues last night. We talk about how they're going to be nice when your offense is on. They're going to be nice when your goaltending is on. They're going to be nice when everything is on. One thing we don't really talk about is there's also going to be nights when everything is off and not working. And we saw that last night. And with a team like the Blues, where their defense is, like I said, such a liability, it's a loss like that is going to look a lot uglier than it might for some other teams in the NHL.
Yeah, absolutely. But if there's one thing this Blues team is good at, it's bouncing back. I believe they lead the team and lead the league and come from behind victories this year. So if you want to put some money down on the Blues for their game on Thursday, maybe a prop bet, maybe a parlay, you can do that over at Bet Online because they would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march to the playoffs and beyond. Bet Online remains the number one spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2022. New year and a new updated desktop and mobile website. To sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit, just use our promo code LOCKEDON to get started. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022. Bet Online is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports. That's at Bet Online, where the game starts. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the struggling Blues team and what they can do to get back in the win column, back to the ways that they know. So don't go anywhere. All right, Josh, looking at the stat sheet, obviously, some huge things that jump off the page at you, right? Obviously, 48 shots on goal to 21 for the St. Louis Blues is not only not a winning recipe for this team, but it doesn't feel like familiar territory to them. I feel like the offense has been pretty consistent for the most part this entire season. And even in games where the defense fails them or the goaltending struggles, the offensive production has still kind of been there. That wasn't the case last night against the Calgary Flames. And I don't know if that's going to be a problem going forward because, like we said, the fatigue and 3 games in 4 days is obviously a very real thing, and being over the border doesn't help that either. But it is interesting to kind of see this team when its offense is not firing on all cylinders, because I don't know if they're capable of picking up the slack in the other 2 facets of the game.
I kind of agree, but I think the flip side of that is the Vancouver game the night before, where they got outshot almost worse than they did in the Calgary game. I believe the shot totals in that Vancouver game were 39-17. So, obviously, watching the game, it told a different story. The Blues were in that Vancouver game much more than they were in the Calgary game. But I think even though, the offense was slow in that game and didn't do a whole lot, they got the goals when they needed to. Jordan Kyrie's third goal was an absolute muffin from the top. So I don't think it's like the case of if your offense doesn't show up, you're screwed. They've definitely won games this season, and as of late, where the defense and goaltending has picked up the slack. I think it more so just comes down to if your offense is poor and the team is playing, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, compared to which goalie they want to play for. I don't know if it's going to be consistent the rest of the season. I hope not, where they put in a full effort in front of Billy Husso and, take a little bit out of the tank again when playing in front of Jordan Binnington. But I think it's been consistent that maybe it's partially Jordan Binnington has, had worse support from his teammates, but also that Jordan Binnington has been getting the tougher matchups. I think his expected save percentage is like absurdly low, which is kind of a fancy way of saying how many of his shots that he's faced is it reasonable to expect him to save. And I believe he's the 4th lowest save percentage in the NHL in terms of expected save percentage. So he is.
Was that in that thread that Luke Horak put out?
Yeah.
If you guys haven't seen that, I would go back in his timeline and look for it because there's some really interesting numbers there for sure.
Right. So I don't think it's as dire as it seems on the surface, but it's definitely something to be concerned about. The fact that Jordan Binnington is facing, such difficult shots, the 4th most difficult shots as compared to everyone in the NHL. Again, I don't know if that's 100% correct, but I know it was like really bad. So his numbers are deceiving this year. He's been not statistically, but he's been pretty good based off of like the statistics you don't look at, like he's made the saves that he needs to make and he's performed above expected based on the difficulty of shots that he's had to face. That being said, the fact that, the St. Louis Blues, the team that prides himself in two-way play, and sure, the defense is weak, But you look at that compared to guys like Ville Husso, Charlie Lindgren, goalies that we really felt like having a very easy time with the Blues. Partially due to their own play, but partially due to the difficulty of shots that they face. It's concerning seeing such a disparity between that and Jordan Binnington going out there and having to stand on his head every night. He's only going to do so well. So the good side of that is Binnington is not as bad as the clickbait Twitter headlines will allude to. His record is not great. His save percentage is not great. His goals allowed average is not great. But when you look a little more closely and you watch the games, I don't think there's really many times where we've looked at Jordan Binnington and be like, man, he was really the weak link tonight. If Jordan Binnington didn't suck, we would have won. I don't think there's been a single game this season where that was the case. Maybe the Toronto game, but probably not. I don't know. So I don't think it's as bad as everybody is kind of freaking out about, but the fact that this kind of exposed a really ugly, ugly side of the St. Louis Blues is going to be a crude wake-up call, because it's clear that unless the team develops a different attitude when playing in front of Binnington, or a new personnel member comes in and joins the defense, Jacob Chychrun, whatever, this is going to be something you're going to have to look out for the St. Louis Blues for the rest of the season, knowing that they can have a game this ugly. Ugh.
Well, here's a question for you, Josh, hypothetically, right? And I think, I don't know. I don't know how close we are to the proverbial domino that's going to start all the other dominoes in terms of this trade deadline season. But it sounds like, I don't know. It sounds like things are picking up and that they could potentially happen sooner rather than later. At least that's what it sounded like on 32 Thoughts with Elliot Friedman and Merrick. So if, in your opinion, let's take, for example, a guy like Jacob Chychrun or Sherratt, just because those are the two biggest names out there really right now and the ones that the Blues are linked to. If they do manage to acquire either of those guys, how much does that improve their chances of winning a Stanley Cup? And is it worth diving in there and giving up these prospects to win now when you've got Ryan O'Reilly's contract on the horizon, obviously Tarasenko's contract on the horizon, but who knows what's going to happen with him in terms of trade value, and Ivan Barbashev has to be paid soon too. So as much as you want to prolong that window with prospects, how important is it to Doug Armstrong to try and win now this season as well?
Yeah, it's interesting because, like I said, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, I feel like when this team's at its best, it feels like they can beat anyone in the NHL. And the poor defense hasn't mattered because they've been scoring so much and keeping the puck out of their own zone so much that defense hasn't even mattered that much. So it kind of comes down to, I think, something that just goes beyond simple hockey ability, and it's really more the psychological aspect of it. Whatever it is that makes the Blues go out and put up 5 goals in 3 consecutive games and then completely turn it around and win a defensive grudge match against the Vancouver Canucks, have 4 games, that are that strong, even though they lost the first one to Toronto, still put up 5 goals, so to play that strong and then all of a sudden come in Calgary and play the absolute, like I said, maybe the worst hockey game I've ever seen in my life. So we've seen that though. We've seen peaks and valleys from the Blues this year. I just think, this week was, maybe the most egregious example, scoring 5 goals in 3 straight games, coming away with a win in another game that you didn't deserve to win, and then coming out and getting blown out 7-1. To me, it comes down to, if you think Jacob Chychrun can, he'll come in and he'll just make the defense better flat out. But also you got to look at it beyond that and say, what does this team need to snap into shape and play as well in front of Husso, or in front of Jordan Binnington, that they do in front of Ville Husso, and play consistent hockey, because it really does feel like we've been taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back a lot throughout the season. And that's great, as long as you're making forward progress. But when the playoffs come around, you can't be taking that 1 step back, because if you do, all of a sudden you're out of a series.
Yeah, so we're going to continue this conversation when we come back, Josh, but I think it's very important to say that our next opponent coming up on Thursday is the Calgary Flames. So this is a big bounce back opportunity for the Blues. So we're going to dive a little bit into that, but mostly about where this team is at right now and how much they struggled against them last game, how they can bounce back in quick fashion like a 2-day break, and then they play them the same day, their same week. So we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. All right, Josh. Thursday, Calgary Flames come to St. Louis to play at home. The Blues have
Forgot
been
about that.
the Blues have been. I know, I did too. The Blues have been pretty good at home this season, a lot better than they have been on the road. Obviously, playing in front of their fans gives them a little bit more energy. Hopefully, a lot more energy than we saw last night. But what are your keys to the game for the St. Louis Blues? And obviously, watching the game through rose-colored lenses last night, it's difficult to pinpoint one thing to where, oh, if we would have just done this, we would have beat them for sure, because there was a whole list of things I feel like that would have fit that criteria. But if you had to name off a couple that you think could be potential weaknesses of the Calgary Flames that the Blues, when they're playing at their best, should be able to exploit, what would those be?
Oy, I mean, we didn't even have time to see what the Calgary Flames weren't good at because they had the puck the whole time.
Right.
I think more of like a vague answer, and the way that I'm kind of looking at it is, remember the game between the New England Patriots and the Buffalo Bills this year where Mac Jones threw the ball 3 times and the Patriots won because like they just, out annoyed the Bills, and it was a complete anomaly and had no real representation of those two teams match up. And then the next 2 times the Bills and Patriots played, Bills blew them out of the water. That's sort of what I'm hoping for and expecting on Thursday, that like if I'm the Calgary Flames, how do you look at Monday's game and say like, okay, yeah, here's where we can beat them? Because hopefully the Blues look, worlds better than they looked last night in that game on Thursday. So it's not even like you can look at that and say, oh yeah, here's where we had the most success. If you're the Flames, you had success everywhere. So my hope is that the Blues come in and they look like they did, in their past few wins, and the Flames kind of get taken on their heels, not expecting a strong over performance from the Blues. And I think that's kind of what their weaknesses would be, is their depth isn't quite as strong as that of the Blues. And if the Blues can, wear them down, and maybe, the Flames come out a little too excited, after that 7-1 victory, looking to, repeat history. I think the Blues play a little bit more responsibly than the Flames at times, but I don't know. It's hard, because it's like, how the heck do you bounce back from that 7-1 embarrassment? You got to just go back to basics. And I think that that's what the Blues are going to do. If I had to guess, I think we're going to see a very Blues hockey style game, and hopefully that'll be low scoring. Man, the question is, who gets the start and goal? That's going to be a big thing.
I didn't even think about that. I bet they'll go. Honestly, I bet they'll go back to Ville Husso to try, and I don't know, for whatever reason, like Twitter's talked about and like we've talked about it. It seems like the team just plays better in front of Ville. So maybe that's a spur of the spark, and maybe that's why he put Ville in the third period. I still don't really know why he pulled Binnington. I mean, the score was 7-1 at that point, so I don't really know what good that did besides maybe jeopardize Binnington's confidence even more. I don't know. But I do know that in familiar fashion to the Colorado Avalanche, although they're obviously 2 very different teams, if you got a guy like Johnny Gaudreau on the other side, and on the same line as Matthew Tkachuk, putting up the numbers that they have been this season, if you get into a track meet against this Calgary Flames team, It's going to be a long night. And I think I don't know if the Blues tried to play a track meet against them last game.
I don't think they tried to play.
They just couldn't skate. I don't even think they couldn't. And they didn't win 50-50 pucks, and they didn't win the puck battles, and they didn't grind along the boards. Like you said, it was very strange to see the Blues play.
It's pathetic.
Such a different style of hockey than they've played all season. Yeah, I never felt like, in really any game, maybe the Arizona one, just because that, I don't know, there was a lot of emotions going on in that one too, so I might have been biased, but it never really felt like work ethic had been an issue with this team all season long. And maybe it's not work ethic, and maybe it's just pure exhaustion, and it looks like work ethic, which I completely understand that, but at this, I don't know, it just looked bad. Like guys skating around and like keeling over and like not really being in position, and like it almost looked like they were going through the motions, which is why I feel like It could have been exhaustion where they just can't move their bodies quick enough. But like I said, you've got Goudreau and Kachuk. And some of these guys on this team are just, and you've got Lucic too. So as much as you can't get into a track meet against these guys, if you play physical, they can still hang with you. So I think that's the best bet for the Blues to win this game is to play their physical brand of hockey, cycle pucks, do what they do best. I think their face-off percentage was 39% last night, which is just horrific.
Oh my
especially when
goodness.
you have Ryan O'Reilly on your team. Like, that's inexcusable. I feel like statistically one of the best face-off teams in the league to have that low of a number. So I'm expecting that number to be up. I'm expecting the shots number to be up. I'm expecting the time on attack for the Calgary Flames to be down. And if all that happens, Billy Husso goes out and puts on a great performance, or Jordan Binnington goes out, puts on a great performance, or neither of those happen and the defense goes out and puts on a great performance, I think the Blues will come out on top.
Yeah, and look, here's the thing: is this is admittedly a huge point for the St. Louis Blues in this season. You try to have the attitude of, oh yeah, just roll on. One game at a time, build off of each game, look to the next one. No, this is a full stop in their season in terms of momentum. Any style, any momentum that they were riding, whatever, positive or negative, ends last night. You have a game that poorly, you sit down after the game and you go, damn, how do we win hockey games again? And as much as that's a little scary, it's also a good opportunity to get back to your roots and, get back to what's successful. And not only do the St. Louis Blues have an opportunity to, have a few days off, regroup, and then come in and play on Thursday and, bounce back from a 7-1 embarrassing defeat, they have an opportunity to do it against the very same team that whooped up on them 7-1. So Thursday's game is a huge opportunity for the Blues to show what they really are in terms of, a hockey team this year, because we've seen ups, we've seen downs. And the fact that they're going out and playing the Calgary Flames again, the Blues have a chance to say, okay, last time we played the Flames, that was the worst of us. But here's what we got when we're playing at our best. If the Blues go out and they do that on Thursday, great. That's the best possible result that this could have had. But flip side of that is they go out and continue to struggle, and you don't really have time for a cold streak now. You're in the second half of the season. Central Division is extremely tight, extremely close. And if you go on a cold stretch like the Blues had earlier in the season, they lose 6, 7 out of 10. They could be fighting for a playoff spot the rest of the season. Huge momentum game on Thursday versus the Calgary Flames.
Yeah, like you said, if they go out and beat the Flames 7-1 in familiar fashion, I'll forget that the last game even existed. But regardless, if they win or they lose in incredible fashion or disappointing fashion, we'll be covering it here on the Locked On Blues podcast. But I think that's all the time we have for today. So thank you guys so much for listening. Make sure you hit that follow or subscribe button on whatever platform you're currently listening to. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Locked On Blues. You can follow me on Twitter at 1215. You can follow Josh on Twitter at Josh Hyman NHL. But like I said, thank you guys so much for listening. And as always, let's go Blues.